I came home to find my baby, crying in the rain. My own mother slammed the door in her face. My name is Rachel Collins, and if you had told me 2 years ago that my biggest heartbreak wouldn't come from a man but from my own family, I would have laughed in disbelief. But nothing prepares you for the moment you see your child soaking wet in the cold, crying her eyes out while your mother, her grandmother, closes the door on her like she's nothing. It was a Friday evening. I had just finished a last-minute shift at the diner where I'd recently started working. Exhausted, I pulled into my mother's driveway, expecting to see my 7-year-old daughter Ellie waiting inside, maybe coloring or watching cartoons like she always did when Mom babysat. Instead, I found Ellie huddled on the concrete porch, her tiny arms hugging her knees, her little body drenched in the rain. Her backpack was thrown beside her wide open, her homework papers soaked and stuck together. "Ellie, baby, what happened?" I jumped out of the car and ran to her, wrapping her in my jacket. She just looked up at me, her lips trembling. "Nana said I was being annoying." She whispered, tears mixing with rain. "She said I needed to wait outside till you got here." Before I could process what I was hearing, the front door creaked open slightly, just enough for me to see the flickering TV inside, and my older sister Donna sitting comfortably on the couch. And then, just as quickly, the door slammed shut. No words, no explanation, just slammed, like we were stray dogs begging on the porch. I stood there, heart racing, eyes burning, and that was when I knew this wasn't just a bad night. Something had shifted, something had broken. I carried Ellie back to my car and sat there with her in the front seat, letting the heater dry her hair, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I looked up at that house, the house I grew up in, the house where I once thought I could find refuge, and realized I was no longer welcome. You see, I'd always told myself that family was everything, that no matter how hard life got, my mother would have my back. But I was wrong. And that night in the rain, it was just the beginning. If you've ever stood outside a door that was supposed to open for you but didn't, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal from someone who once held your hand as a child, then you know. You know the ache that doesn't go away. And if you've ever been there, left outside in the storm, then I want you to stay with me for this story. Because what came next changed everything. If you've ever been in a moment like this where love turned its back and silence screamed louder than any fight, leave a like and stay with me. This story isn't just mine. It's for anyone who's ever been shut out by the very people who were supposed to let them in. The drive back home was quiet, too quiet. Ellie had curled up in the back seat, her jacket still damp, her eyes swollen from crying. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, trying to piece together what had just happened. My own mother had locked my daughter out in the rain. No warning, no apology, just a slammed door. I wanted to scream, but mostly I wanted to understand. Why? The next morning I called my mom. No answer. I texted her. Nothing. So I did what I always did when I couldn't let something go. I drove straight to her house. She opened the door this time, but the look in her eyes wasn't one of guilt. It was indifference. "I thought I made it clear I'm not a daycare," she said flatly, arms crossed. "You can't keep dumping her on me every time you have a shift." "Dumping her?" I asked, stunned. "You offered to watch her. You said you wanted to." That was before she started acting like a spoiled little brat. "I don't have the patience for it anymore, Rachel." Her words cut deeper than I expected. This wasn't about Ellie's behavior. This was about something else. But before I could ask my sister, Donna appeared behind her, sipping coffee from a mug that used to be mine. She didn't say a word, just smirked. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just frustration, this was planned. A few months back, I had turned down Donna's offer to join her MLM beauty business. I was a single mom trying to make ends meet, barely making rent, living off diner tips, and sharing a twin mattress with Ellie. I couldn't risk investing in inventory I knew I couldn't sell. And Donna had never forgiven me for saying no. Now I was beginning to wonder if Mom hadn't either. I left that day with a fire in my chest. Not just because of what they did to Ellie, but because I realized something horrifying. I wasn't losing my family. I already had. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. My mom stopped answering any of my messages. My sister blocked me completely. And then came the whisper campaign, cousins not returning my calls, friends pulling away. Someone was poisoning the well behind my back, and I knew exactly who. But while they were spreading stories, I was doing something else, rebuilding. I found a second job teaching night classes at the local community center. I reached out to an old friend who helped me get on a subsidized housing wait list. I sold off the last jewelry my father had left me to buy Ellie a proper bed. And I made a promise to myself. No more begging. No more waiting on people who lock doors instead of opening them. That promise became my fuel. I was done proving myself to people who had already decided I wasn't enough. And it was in that quiet determination, those late nights working double shifts, those mornings packing Ellie's school lunch with one hand while grading papers with the other, that something unexpected started to happen. Ellie began to bloom again. Her eyes got brighter. Her laugh returned. I started to see that maybe I didn't need my old family to feel whole. Maybe we were enough, just the two of us. Because sometimes the people who shut you out are doing you a favor. They're forcing you to build your own door and walk through it on your terms. I didn't know it yet, but this journey was just beginning. And soon, everything they thought they took from me, I would reclaim it piece by piece. I started marking days on the calendar, not counting down, but counting up. Every day that passed was one more day I didn't ask them for help. One more day Ellie and I stood on our own. But then the school called. Ellie had gotten into a fight. My heart sank as I drove to the principal's office. I kept thinking, please let it be a misunderstanding. But when I walked in and saw Ellie sitting alone, arms crossed, bruised cheek, I knew it wasn't. The principal's voice was firm, but not unkind. Your daughter hit another student. We don't condone violence, but when we spoke to her, she said the girl called her garbage, and that her own grandmother didn't want her. I was speechless. That was it. That was what they'd done. Not just to me, but to her. The rejection, the abandonment, the whispers. It had seeped into her little world, into her very sense of self. I knelt beside her. Ellie, I whispered, you are not garbage. You are brave. You stood up for yourself. But there are better ways to do it, and I'm going to show you how. She didn't cry, she just nodded. And in that moment, I realized she was stronger than I ever gave her credit for. But I had to be stronger too, because this wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about healing. I enrolled Ellie in a weekend art therapy program at the rec center. She started painting again, bright colors, bold shapes, pictures of girls in capes flying over gray cities. I couldn't afford much, but I made it happen. I started skipping my one indulgence coffee from the shop on Main Street and brewed it at home. Every dollar counted. And little by little, we started to feel human again. But then came the text. It was from Donna. You'll regret the way you treated Mom. Family doesn't forget. I stared at the screen. Regret for what? For protecting my daughter, for expecting basic decency. And that's when I made the decision I wasn't going to hide anymore. I posted our story online, not out of revenge, but out of truth. No names, no accusations. Just a story about a mother and daughter who were left in the rain and what they did after. I didn't expect what happened next. Comments poured in, hundreds, then thousands. People who had been through the same thing. People who said this was my story too. People who said I gave them courage. And in the quiet of our tiny living room, I sat on the floor with Ellie in my lap, reading every word. We weren't alone. We were never alone. We just didn't know where to look. That story became a turning point. An old friend I hadn't heard from in years reached out and offered me a freelance writing job based on what I'd shared. Just small pieces, human stories. But it was something. I could feel the tide turning. I could feel me turning. No longer the girl who waited by the phone. No longer the daughter begging to be loved. I was becoming the woman I needed to be, the mother Ellie deserved. And I knew my story wasn't over. It was just getting to the good part. I started waking up early again. Not because I had to rush for work, or because Ellie needed me to, but because I wanted to. For the first time in years, I craved the silence before sunrise, the soft golden hue filtering through the blinds, the sound of Ellie breathing softly in her room, and the chance to just be. I used that time to write little essays, quiet stories, about strength, about betrayal, about rainstorms, and the women who walk through them. The friend who'd given me the freelance opportunity kept sending me more work. Before long, it wasn't just side money, it was a living. A modest one, but one I could call mine. Ellie started smiling more. She brought home a clay sculpture from art therapy. It was of a tall, curvy woman with a superhero cape and wild hair. That's you, she said simply. I didn't cry in front of her. But that night when she was asleep, I held that little sculpture in my hands and wept quietly. Somehow through the pain and chaos, my daughter still saw strength, still saw me. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. One day, while folding laundry, I came across the sweater my mom gave Ellie for her birthday the year before. It still had the tag on it. Ellie had refused to wear it. When I asked her why, she shrugged. It smells like her perfume. I don't like how it makes me feel. It hit me then she wasn't just hurt. She was learning what it meant to set boundaries. She was learning what I should have taught her long ago. That loving someone doesn't mean tolerating their cruelty. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do for your own soul is to walk away. The world around us didn't change much. Rent still came on the first. Groceries still felt more expensive every week. Life wasn't suddenly perfect, but something inside us had shifted. We were no longer surviving, we were building. And then came the invitation. A cream-colored envelope with shiny gold trim slid under our apartment door. It was from my sister. Mom's 60th birthday dinner, formal, family-only, Saturday night. No apology, no explanation, just that. For a moment I laughed, out loud. And then I sat on the couch turning that card over in my hands. Ellie walked in and saw it. Her face twisted with something between confusion and quiet dread. "Do we have to go?" I looked at her and said the words that would become a defining moment between us. "No, baby, we never have to go where we're not respected." She nodded slowly and smiled. It wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about holding the line, a line I should have drawn years ago. Because boundaries don't make you cruel. They make you whole. They teach your children where love ends and dignity begins. And I realized in that quiet moment with my daughter, this was what strength looked like. Not slamming doors, not shouting matches, but choosing peace over approval. Every single time. My sister didn't take silence well. 3 days after we ignored the invitation, she called. I didn't answer. Then came the text. "Mom's really hurt. At least you could send Ellie." That's when I knew they didn't change. They hadn't learned a thing. It wasn't an invitation out of remorse. It was control in disguise. And they thought Ellie was still theirs to mold. So I did something I never imagined I'd do. I blocked them all. Not out of anger, but protection. For Ellie, for myself, for the fragile, peaceful world we'd finally started to build. And the silence that followed. It felt like sunlight after months of rain. But the peace didn't last long. That weekend, my building's security called up. A woman downstairs was insisting on seeing me, claimed to be my mother. I looked out the window. There she was. Expensive coat, tight jaw, arms crossed like she owned the street. I didn't go down. I picked up Ellie's clay sculpture from the shelf and sat on the couch holding it like a shield. Then my phone rang. It was Mom again, I answered. "You think you can cut off your own family because of some petty disagreement?" Her voice was low, restrained. I breathed. "It's not a disagreement when you hurt my child." "She's fine, stop being dramatic." That word dramatic burned like a match on dry skin. The same word she used when I cried as a girl, when she called me soft, sensitive, ungrateful. I clenched my jaw. Ellie cried for nights. She had nightmares. She still asks if she did something wrong. Mom paused. "I'm sorry she felt that way." That wasn't an apology. That was a deflection. And I told her so. Then I said something I never thought I had the strength to say. "I don't owe you access to my life, or my daughter's." Her breath caught. For once, she had nothing to say. I hung up. That moment, it felt like cutting the final thread in a net that had held me underwater for decades. And as I sat there, heart-pounding, Ellie walked out of her room. "Was that Grandma?" I nodded. She sat beside me quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, "I don't want to see them." "You won't," I said, "not unless they change. And even then, it's your choice." She leaned into me, "Thank you." And right there in that quiet Saturday afternoon, I knew we were finally free. Free from the guilt, the gaslighting, the cycle. We were rewriting our story. And if you've ever had to choose between your peace and someone else's expectations, if you've ever been called ungrateful for protecting your child's heart, then you know how heavy but how holy this kind of decision is. So if this story resonates with you, if you've ever stood at that same emotional crossroads, I'd love for you to stay with us. Like this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and maybe subscribe to this little journey of healing. You're not alone, and your peace matters. The next few weeks were quieter than I expected. There were no calls, no surprise visits, no angry voicemails from my sister, or guilt-tripping texts from Mom. Just silence. And in that silence, Ellie and I found a strange kind of rhythm. We baked cookies at night, blasting 80s music while she danced around in mismatched socks. I helped her build a cardboard spaceship for school, and she made me promise we'd launch it into real space one day. For the first time in years, I felt like a good mom, a present mom. Not someone surviving her own childhood while trying to raise a child, but someone creating something better. Still, the quiet didn't mean they had given up. One evening, I picked Ellie up from art class, and she was holding something behind her back. When I asked what it was, she hesitated. "It's just something Auntie Dana gave me." I stopped in my tracks. Dana, my sister, wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that school. My heart raced as I crouched down. Where did you see Auntie Dana? She was in the parking lot. She said she missed me. She gave me this, Ellie said, pulling out a sparkly unicorn journal. I took it slowly from her hands. Did she say anything else? Ellie nodded. She said, you were being unfair, that you were mad for no reason. My stomach turned. Not because of what was said, but because they were trying to reach her through me. They weren't respecting boundaries. They were undermining them. That night I contacted the school and requested additional security. I made it very clear that my sister and mother were not allowed near Ellie without exception. The principal understood, but it still shook me to my core. They hadn't changed. They were just regrouping. Ellie saw it too. That night she asked if we had to move. No, baby, I said gently, but we're going to make sure you're always safe, okay? She nodded and wrapped her arms around my waist, and I felt her tiny heartbeat against my side like a quiet drum of courage. It made me think, how many times had I let my own heart get drowned out by guilt? How many times had I given in because I didn't want to cause more problems? But Ellie's safety wasn't a problem. Her peace wasn't negotiable, and neither was mine. The next morning I sat down and wrote an official cease and desist letter. I didn't want to, but I had to. It wasn't about revenge. It was about putting in writing what I'd already put into action. We were no longer part of the dysfunction. When the letter was delivered, I expected backlash, a tantrum, more manipulation. Instead, Mom sent a single text. You're breaking this family apart. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't the one breaking it, I was refusing to let it break me and my daughter. That weekend, Ellie and I visited a local art gallery. She stood in front of a painting of a tree split by lightning, then slowly healing at the break. Look, Mommy, she said, it's growing back stronger. I smiled, my throat tight. Yeah, it is. And maybe that's what we were doing, growing back stronger from a break no one else thought needed healing. If you've ever been told that protecting your peace is betrayal, or that drawing a line is being selfish, I want you to know this. It takes more strength to walk away than to stay stuck. Sometimes love means distance, and sometimes healing means letting go. It was a crisp Saturday morning when I got the call. Not from Mom, not from Dana, from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Madison Blake? I hesitated. Yes, who's calling? This is Officer Lynn from the Asheville PD. We're calling about an incident at your former family residence. My heart dropped. Your name was flagged as the previous owner of the property. A trespassing report was filed, and we thought you should be made aware. My breath caught. Trespassing, I sold that house months ago. Yes, ma'am. The new owners found several individuals inside claiming they had a right to be there. One of them mentioned you by name, said you had given them permission. I knew exactly who it was. Dana, or worse, Mom. They were squatting in a home that no longer belonged to us, using my name as justification. The audacity, the entitlement, the complete disconnect from reality. But that wasn't even the worst part. The officer paused. There was a young child with them, claimed to be your niece. I froze. They brought her into this, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, Dana's daughter, Lily. And that's when it hit me. Dana had used her own child as a pawn in whatever twisted game she was still playing. Just like Mom used me. Just like they always did. History wasn't repeating, it was metastasizing. After hanging up, I stared out the window of my tiny new apartment. Ellie was coloring at the kitchen table, humming a tune from her favorite cartoon. This was what I had fought for, this peace, this safety. And now, even without being near us, they were dragging chaos back into our orbit. I had a decision to make. I could let it slide, pretend it wasn't my problem anymore, or I could take a step I'd been avoiding for months. I called my lawyer. Madison, he said after I explained the situation, you need to protect yourself. If they're using your name, misrepresenting property rights, and involving minors, we're looking at legal action, maybe even CPS. Part of me recoiled, turn in my own sister, but then I remembered Lily's eyes the last time I saw her. Quiet, withdrawn. That child wasn't safe in Dana's care. And if no one stepped in, what happened to me might happen to her. So I gave my lawyer the green light. 2 days later, the paperwork was in motion, official reports, affidavits in order, barring Dana and Mom from using my name or likeness in any financial or property-related claim. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about legacy. Because if cycles don't break, they keep repeating. And I refused to let my daughter or my niece grow up thinking love looked like manipulation, and silence was safety. That night, Ellie asked why I looked tired. I had to make a hard decision, I said gently. She tilted her head. Like when you said no to Grandma. I nodded, exactly like that. She slid over her drawing. It was a picture of two stick figures holding hands beneath a sun that said, "Safe together." "I like this life better," she whispered. And suddenly I didn't feel tired anymore. If you've ever had to make a painful choice to protect someone you love, especially from your own family, you're not alone. And your courage deserves to be seen. If any part of this story resonates, leave a comment. Your voice might help someone find theirs. 3 days later, as I was sorting through my mail, a thick envelope slipped out from between two catalogs. It had no return address, just my name handwritten in block letters. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a folded letter and a faded photograph. The photo was old, probably taken in the early 90s. A teenage girl stood in front of a modest house arms wrapped protectively around a child with wild brown curls. The teenager looked familiar. The child was unmistakably me. I turned to the letter. "Dear Madison, you don't know me, but I knew your father. My name is Claire Atwood. I worked with him at the electrical plant back in the late 80s. I was much younger than him. We were close, closer than anyone knew. I left Asheville shortly after a difficult time, and I've spent years watching from afar, until now." My hands trembled. "I was there when your father got the promotion your mother didn't want him to take. I saw what it did to their marriage, but I also saw you bright-eyed, quiet, always clutching that notebook like it was armor. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you." The next part sent a chill down my spine. "Your mother and sister have been lying to you for a long time. The trust fund. It was real. Your father set it up in your name before his last deployment. He wanted to make sure you'd be okay no matter what happened at home. But after he passed, it was hidden, misused. I know this because I was the custodian, at least on paper. Your father didn't trust anyone in the family. He asked me to keep records in a private ledger just in case. I never thought I'd use it. But now, I think you deserve to see the truth." At the bottom of the envelope was a flash drive. I stared at it, unsure what to feel: anger, relief, confusion. For years I was told there was no money, no trust, that everything had been used up on bills and debt and Dana's school, which she never even finished. I accepted it, because questioning my family had always come with consequences. But now, out of nowhere, a woman I couldn't even recall had handed me the key to everything they'd stolen. I called my lawyer. He was stunned. "If this documentation is legitimate, it changes everything. Misappropriation, fraud, you could reopen the estate, sue for restitution, possibly press charges." I leaned back in my chair, staring at Ellie, who was chasing soap bubbles on the patio. "Would it help my daughter?" I asked. "It could secure her future," he said. That night, I sat at my desk, the photo beside me, the flash drive loaded. I opened the files slowly, each one a breadcrumb bank, records, notarized letters, transaction histories. The trust fund had been siphoned into multiple accounts over 2 decades, masked as educational expenses, home loans, even spa retreats. And the withdrawals were signed, always the same name: Donna. I felt a strange stillness come over me. Not rage, not grief, just a quiet, exhausted clarity. They never wanted me to have anything. Not love, not support, not even what was mine by right. But now, for the first time in my life, I had something they didn't expect me to find. Proof. And with that proof came power. If you've ever uncovered a truth that shattered your past, but gave you power over your future, then you know what this moment feels like. If you've been silenced, manipulated, or kept in the dark, let this be your sign: your truth matters. And it deserves a voice. The next morning, I stood in front of the courthouse in downtown Asheville, holding the manila folder filled with Claire Atwood's documents. I hadn't told Ellie where I was going. I hadn't told anyone. For the first time, I wasn't asking permission. Inside, the clerk looked up when I placed the file on her desk. "I'd like to file a motion to reopen my father's estate." I said, steady but calm. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you have cause?" I slid the first 3 pages forward. Bank transfers, signatures, a sworn affidavit from Claire. She scanned the documents, her demeanor shifting. "You may want to speak directly with the probate judge. I'll schedule you in. This isn't small." I walked out of that office not feeling triumphant, but rooted, like I'd finally stepped into the shoes I should have been wearing my entire adult life. For 2 decades, I'd let my family tell me who I was, that I was weak, that I needed to be managed, that I was just a quiet, nervous girl who didn't have what it took to stand up. But this was different. I was doing it for Ellie, For the version of me that used to hide her report cards because Dana would rip them in half. For the girl who once asked her mom why the lights got shut off and was told to shut up if she didn't want a slap. Later that day, I got a message request on Facebook from Dana. "I know what you're doing. Don't be stupid. You don't want this fight." I stared at her words for a moment, then typed only 2 words: "Watch me." That weekend, I took Ellie to the lake. It had been a rough few weeks of tension planning silence. She looked up at me as we ate sandwiches on the dock. "Mom, are we okay?" she asked softly. I looked her straight in the eyes. "We're not just okay, baby. We're finally getting free." And I meant it. Later that night, the phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. "Madison." It was Aunt Ruth, my mother's sister. The only person in the family who ever treated me like a person instead of an inconvenience. "I heard what you're doing," she said. "I'm proud of you." I exhaled, unexpectedly emotional. You've always been the one with the most sense." They didn't know what to do with that. "I've got something you may need." She mailed me a box the next day. Inside, copies of letters, canceled checks, and most damning of all, a VHS tape converted to USB. It was a recording of a family dinner from 2007. Everyone was there: my mom, my dad, Dana. I wasn't invited. On camera, they toasted to Dana for keeping the trust in the family. Then my mother added, laughing, "And let's hope Madison never gets curious." I sat still for a long time, then slowly closed the laptop. They had toasted to robbing me, to hiding what was mine. And if you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, if you've ever discovered your silence was exactly what they were counting on, then you'll understand why I couldn't stay quiet anymore. You're not alone in this. Speak up. Reclaim what's yours. Not just the money, but the voice, the peace, the power they told you didn't belong to you. The courtroom was colder than I expected, like the walls themselves held judgment. I sat on one side, flanked by my attorney Rachel, a no-nonsense woman who'd reviewed every detail of my father's original will and the suspicious amendments added after his stroke. Across from me sat my mother and Dana. Dana wore a deep green suit, like she was attending a gala, not a probate hearing. My mother refused to look in my direction, but I saw the tension in her jaw. When the judge entered, the room shifted. He was middle-aged, direct, and not one for pleasantries. After introducing the case, he asked if either party wanted to make a statement before the evidence was submitted. I stood. "My name is Madison Blake. I am the biological daughter of Arthur Blake. For most of my adult life, I believed I was left out of his will because I didn't matter. That belief shaped every decision I made, from how I raised my child to how I let people treat me. But I was wrong. My father didn't betray me. Someone else did." I handed over the folder with Claire's notarized testimony, financial transfers between trust accounts, and Aunt Ruth's letters. My hands didn't shake this time. The judge read each page slowly. Then, to everyone's surprise, he asked, "Where is Claire Atwood?" "She's on Zoom, Your Honor," Rachel responded, pulling up the laptop. Claire's calm, resolute voice filled the room. She recounted how she was approached by Dana shortly after my father's second stroke. Dana had asked her to redirect funds from the trust to a new account, one under Dana's control. The justification: Madison would just waste it. When the judge asked Claire why she complied, she hesitated before replying, "I was afraid of losing my job, Your Honor, but it's haunted me since." Then came the VHS turned USB file. It played clearly on the screen, my family laughing about how I would never figure it out, clinking glasses while my name hung in the air like a dirty secret. When the video ended, the silence was suffocating. My mother finally spoke. She was always sensitive. We didn't think she could handle the responsibility. I turned toward her, my voice low but cutting. "You mean I wouldn't be easy to manipulate? That's what you really meant." The judge recessed for an hour. I walked outside and found Ellie waiting in the hallway with Aunt Ruth. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked. I looked at her, my daughter, my reason. "I am now." A few minutes later, I got a notification on my phone. A YouTube comment from a woman named Caroline. "I watched your story from the beginning. It gave me courage to speak up against my own family. Thank you." And right then, I realized something. This fight wasn't just about me. It was about everyone who'd been told they were too much, too weak, too emotional to be trusted with their own truth. So if you're watching this right now, and you've ever been gaslit into silence, ever felt invisible at your own dinner table, or ever watched your family rewrite history while you stood on the sidelines, don't just stay quiet. Leave a comment, share your story, let them hear your voice. Because I promise you, someone out there is waiting for permission to speak up, and your story might be what sets them free. When we returned to the courtroom after the recess, you could sense a change in the air. My mother no longer sat upright, her shoulders sagged, her eyes darted nervously. Dana fidgeted, her perfectly lacquered nails tapping against the table, like the ticking of a bomb she didn't know how to defuse. The judge took his seat and cleared his throat. The room hushed. I've reviewed the evidence, including financial documentation, sworn statements, and the video file, he began. It's clear that alterations were made to Arthur Blake's will and the associated trust after his second stroke alterations that were neither in his best interest nor legally valid under state law. He turned to Dana. Ms. Dana Blake, your actions constituted willful manipulation of a vulnerable individual for personal gain. Furthermore, you coerced a financial advisor into breaking fiduciary responsibilities. This court finds these amendments to the will invalid. My breath caught. The judge continued pair. The original will dated and notarized before Arthur Blake's medical decline. The entirety of the estate properties, trust funds, and business shares will revert to the named beneficiary. He paused, and then looked directly at me. Ms. Madison Blake. It didn't register at first. Rachel squeezed my arm, but I was too stunned to move. Ellie gasped. Aunt Ruth cried quietly behind me. Across the room, Dana stood up. This is insane. She abandoned Dad. She moved across the country. She wasn't there. The judge raised his gavel slightly. One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt, Ms. Blake. Dana sat seething, and then came the next twist. The judge said, as for the unauthorized financial transfers, this court is recommending the matter be forwarded to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. Ms. Atwood has agreed to cooperate as a key witness. Dana went pale. My mother leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table, her whole body trembling, not from grief, but from exposure. Outside the courthouse, I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I didn't say I told you so. I just held my daughter's hand and walked to the car like I had nothing left to prove. But before I stepped in, I turned to the small crowd of reporters. Yes, I was written out of my father's will, but it wasn't because he stopped loving me. It was because someone else decided I didn't deserve what he left behind. This isn't about money. This is about rewriting the truth, and I refuse to stay silent. One reporter asked, "What do you want now?" I smiled faintly. Peace. And maybe a little justice for everyone who's been pushed out of their own story. That night at home, I opened my laptop and saw hundreds of comments flood in. One said, "This is the most powerful family drama I've ever seen. Thank you for standing up." Another read, "You made me believe I'm not alone. If this video reached you, if it struck something deep inside, then please take a moment to tell me your story. Have you ever been erased, rewritten, rejected by the very people who were supposed to protect you? Drop a comment, share your truth. And if you believe in standing up for yourself, for your story, and for those still finding their voice, subscribe to this channel. Let's keep building a place where no one gets silenced again. I never expected her to show up at my door. 3 days after the court ruling, just as the sun was setting and Ellie and I had finished dinner, I heard a soft, hesitant knock. I froze. Not because I feared her, but because I didn't know what I'd do when I saw her face again. When I opened the door, there she was. My mother. Her eyes were red makeup streaked from crying, or maybe she just hadn't worn any at all. That would have been a first. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. She wasn't the woman who once towered over me in her judgment and disdain. She was someone else now, weathered, worn, and quiet. "Can I come in?" she asked. I didn't move. "What for?" "To talk," she whispered. "Just talk." Ellie peeked out from the living room. I turned to her and said softly, "Go upstairs, honey." She obeyed, always so gentle, always so observant. I stepped aside, wordless. My mother entered like a shadow slipping through a crack in the wall. We sat in the kitchen. I didn't offer her tea. I didn't ask how she'd been. She was the one who broke the silence. "I didn't know how to be your mother." It wasn't an apology, it was an opening. "I wasn't what you wanted," I replied, "but I also wasn't what you feared, and still you treated me like a threat. All I ever wanted was to be enough." She nodded, her eyes fixed on the kitchen table like it held all the answers. "I didn't hate you," she said slowly. "I envied you. That I didn't expect," she continued. "Your father saw something in you, your mind, your fire, your independence, things I never had the courage to fight for. I saw it as rejection. I thought if I could shape Dana into what he wanted, maybe I'd be safe. Maybe I'd stay needed. I felt something crack inside me. "So you erased me to feel needed." "I thought you'd leave us anyway," she said, "and I wanted control over how." A long silence fell between us. I stood and walked to the window, arms folded. I needed a mother, not a rival, not a jealous woman whispering that I wasn't enough. Just a mother. She didn't deny it. Then she asked the one question I hadn't prepared for: can we ever rebuild this? I turned to her. I don't know, I said honestly. But what I do know is this rebuilding isn't about words in a kitchen after you've burned the house down. It's about actions, and time, and truth. She nodded again. Can I see Ellie? Not yet, I said. She remembers more than you think. And she's still learning that being loved should never hurt. She stood up, but before leaving, she paused at the door. Madison, you became everything I never had the courage to be. I didn't reply. After she left, I sat alone at that kitchen table, tracing every word, every silence, every wound. Sometimes survival means understanding that the apology might come, but it may never be enough. And healing begins the moment you stop waiting for the past to say sorry and start giving the future a chance to bloom without it. Have you ever had someone walk back into your life too late? Tell me in the comments. Your voice matters. And maybe, just maybe, someone else is waiting to hear that they're not alone in their pain. And if this story speaks to you, if it reminds you that sometimes strength is walking away with your head held high, then stay with me. Subscribe. Because our stories deserve to be heard, and I'll keep telling them until no one feels erased again. 3 weeks later, I went back. Not out of nostalgia, not to reconcile, but because the lawyer had asked me to pick up some final documents from my father's house, the house I once called home. I drove slowly through the familiar neighborhood where the trees seemed older, heavier with silence. Every brick of that house held a memory, some warm, most aching. But I wasn't that little girl any more desperate for approval behind those walls. I parked outside. The porch light was still broken. The same ivy still crept along the mailbox, but something in the air felt different. Maybe because I wasn't afraid anymore. The front door was unlocked. That alone told me everything I needed to know. They no longer saw it as my place, either just a storage space for what was left of the past, a forgotten chapter. I stepped in. The smell hit first dust, perfume, wood polish, and something old, like secrets. The house was quiet. The lawyer had said the papers were in Dad's old study. As I moved through the hall, my hand brushed against the faded wallpaper, my footsteps soft on the hardwood floors where I used to slide in socks as a child. The silence wasn't haunting, it was cleansing. I found the documents on the desk just as he said, neatly stacked, paper-clipped. But something else caught my eye. A small wooden box, unmarked, slightly dusty. It had no lock. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were old photos, some I'd never seen before me as a baby on my father's shoulders, drawings I had made as a child, ticket stubs from school plays. But underneath it all was a letter, folded, with my name on it. Madison! My heart stopped. I opened it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably his, firm, angled, disciplined. It read, "If you're reading this, it means I've failed in ways I may never fully understand. I wish I had said this when I was alive, but maybe I wasn't brave enough. Or maybe I thought I had time. But you deserve to know, of all the things I've built in this life, you were the one thing I was most proud of. I didn't always know how to show it, especially when you didn't do things my way. But I watched you, Madison. I watched you rise. I watched you refuse to be broken. And somewhere deep down, I hoped you'd forgive me. Not because I deserve it, but because you deserve peace." I sat down, slowly, as if the weight of those words had knocked me to my knees. He had known. He had seen me. Even in silence, he had seen me. I placed the letter back in the box gently, as if it were a living thing. I didn't cry. Not yet. The tears came later when I got home and Ellie hugged me and I realized I had broken the cycle. That day, I didn't just walk out of my childhood home. I walked out whole. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about setting yourself free. And sometimes closure doesn't come from confrontation, but from a quiet truth hidden in a wooden box, waiting for you when you're finally ready to receive it. Have you ever discovered something that changed how you saw your past? Share it with me in the comments. Someone out there might need to hear your story too. And if you've ever walked into the fire of your history just to rise from the ashes, don't walk alone. Subscribe. Because here we tell the stories no one else dares to say out loud. And we do it together. The moment I saw Dana again, it was as if the air itself thickened. We were both summoned to a final settlement review. Not in court, but at the law office, neutral territory. No gavel, no judge, just beige walls and uncomfortable silence. She walked in late, of course. Black sunglasses, a designer purse, and that familiar look like the world owed her something. But behind the glamour, I could see it cracks. Her mouth drawn tighter, her steps slower. The kind of exhaustion that comes when you realize the game is no longer in your hands. Madison, she said coldly, sitting across the long oak table. I nodded, keeping my posture calm. No words wasted. The lawyer explained we were only here to finalize the severance of all claims, meaning the lawsuit she and my parents filed against me for emotional damages for disrupting family business for withholding support would be permanently dropped, because they had nothing left to stand on. It was over. The house wasn't theirs. The business account was dissolved. Every document had been fact-checked, verified, and reinforced by legal precedent. And I had stood my ground. For once. But then Dana said something I didn't expect. Do you think this made you better than us? I turned to look at her, not the woman who ruined my credit, or called me selfish, or treated Ellie like a nuisance. I looked at my sister, my own flesh and blood who had made me believe for years that I was less than. And I said calmly, no, I think this made me free. She blinked, just once. But in that moment, I could tell something in her shifted. Maybe it was regret. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the faintest flicker of understanding. You left me no choice, she whispered. You knew what Dad expected. Maybe I did, I replied. But what he expected almost destroyed me, and I won't let Ellie inherit that. Dana looked down. That was the first time she didn't interrupt me. The room was silent for a while. Then the lawyer passed the final papers across the table. We each signed our names. With that pen stroke, we legally severed a chain that had tied me to their approval, their control, their manipulation. Before I left, I said something I hadn't planned. I don't hate you, Dana, but I can't carry your weight anymore. And then I walked out. Not with pride. With peace. Outside the office, Ellie was waiting in the car playing music on her phone. She looked up when I approached and asked, "It's over." "It is," I nodded. We drove home in silence for a while. The kind of silence that feels like space being made for something new. Then Ellie reached over and grabbed my hand. "You were really brave," she said softly. I didn't answer right away. But in that moment, I realized maybe the point wasn't to win against them. Maybe it was to finally choose me. If you've ever had to walk away from the people you once thought you couldn't live without, I hope you know it's okay. Sometimes love doesn't come with loyalty. Sometimes family isn't who raised you, but who stands beside you when it's hardest. And if this story has stirred something in you, maybe a memory, a buried truth, or the courage to take your first step, then don't stay silent. Leave a comment. Tell me what freedom means to you. And if you're still on the journey, still piecing yourself back together, I see you. Subscribe. Stay with us. Because the road may be long, but you're never walking it alone. The weeks that followed were quiet. Not the kind of silence that comes from absence, but the kind that grows when you're no longer fighting to be heard. Ellie and I moved into a modest townhouse just outside Asheville. Nothing grand, nothing dramatic, just ours. For the first time in years, every corner of our home was filled with ease. Laughter returned. We painted her room together. She picked purple, said it felt like peace. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun slip behind the hills, Ellie turned to me and said, "I don't miss them." I didn't ask who she meant. We both knew. And that sentence so simple hit deeper than any court ruling ever could. I had spent so long carrying guilt, wondering if I had done too much, not enough, or if I was the villain in someone else's version of the story. But watching my daughter finally breathe, finally smile without fear, it reminded me, sometimes choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I wrote a letter, not to my parents, not to Dana, to myself. It read, "Dear Madison, you've been the peacemaker, the provider, the scapegoat, and the sacrifice. But today, you are none of those things. Today, you are simply you. And that is finally enough. You stood up, you protected your child, you broke a pattern that was never yours to keep. They called it betrayal, but you called it truth. And you chose it anyway. That is your legacy now. Let peace find you. You've earned it." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer just beneath Ellie's ultrasound photo. A reminder of why I fought and why I stopped. Weeks turned to months. Ellie started 8th grade. I took on a new position, project lead at a firm that respected my time, my boundaries, and more importantly, me. One Saturday morning, I got a call from the bank. Apparently, a wire transfer had been made to an account I'd closed. From my father. The memo line just read for what we took. I never touched the money because I wasn't interested in payback. I already had everything I needed. Freedom. And maybe that's what I want you to remember. Family isn't just about who raised you, who shares your blood, or who shows up for the holidays. Family is who shows up when your world is falling apart and helps you rebuild. Family is the kid who hugs you in the dark and says you're enough. It's the voice inside you that whispers, even when you've lost everything, don't give up. So if you're watching this and you're standing where I once stood at that terrifying edge between loyalty and truth, listen closely. You are allowed to walk away from what breaks you. You are allowed to protect your peace even if they don't understand it. And you are allowed to choose a better story for you and for the ones who will come after you. If this story reached you, if you've ever felt trapped between love and survival, tell me. Leave a comment below. I'll read everyone. And if you're still holding your breath, let it out. You've held it long enough. Hit that subscribe button. Let's keep walking together. Because sometimes healing isn't about going back, it's about choosing never to return. Some stories don't end with a bang or a grand apology. Sometimes they end in silence, peaceful, quiet, steady. That's how mine ended. Not with my parents begging for forgiveness, not with a courtroom showdown, not even with Dana finally admitting she was wrong. It ended with me letting go. Letting go of the need for validation. Letting go of the fantasy that someday they'd see the real me. Letting go of the idea that being strong meant staying enduring or proving my worth to people who never saw it. I chose a different kind of ending, one where healing wasn't about fixing what was broken, but building something new, a life where Ellie wakes up safe, where I drink coffee on the porch without dreading the next phone call, where boundaries are sacred and love doesn't cost my sanity. And you know what? That's more than enough. So if you're listening to this wondering whether you're crazy or selfish or heartless for walking away from the people who were supposed to protect you, hear me. You're not. You're brave. You're building a life they never imagined for you. One that doesn't require permission. One where your peace matters. If this story touched something in you, let it be the start of yours. Subscribe if you're ready to take that step. Comment below if you've walked a similar path. I promise you're not alone anymore. We're out here, we made it, and so will you.